Welcome back, everyone. We're going to start the second half of our symposium. So please come and seat yourself because you are in for a treat. I know we have this generic term, partner military. It just sounds really boring, but it's not. It's not boring at all. And so we actually have our midday keynote is going to be provided by one of our wonderful WPS advocates in the Canadian military. So let me read a little bit about our speaker, and then we'll go ahead and have her address us, and we will have some time for Q&A. So this is Major Kathleen Leaton. Yeah. Wave those maple leaves if you got them. Major Leaton joined the Royal Canadian Air Force. It just sounds so much, more impressive. The Royal Canadian Air Force in Kingston, Ontario in 2008 and completed basic military officer qualification in Saint Jean, Quebec, that same year. The following April, she attended basic trade training at the Canadian Forces School of Aerospace Control Operations in Cornwall, Ontario, where she was awarded the Major Sam Gilliard Memorial Award for the top student in weapons. So if we're attacked today, you are our leader, right? Okay. Excellent. Well, we got that Marine One over in the other building, maybe we can, Her first assignment was with 21 Air Control and Warning Squadron, 22 Wing North Bay, where she served as a weapons director and senior director. Obviously, the Royal Canadian Air Force knows a good officer when they see her. In 2010, she was awarded the Junior Officer Canadian NORAD Region Award due to her strong aptitude for controlling and her varied, I think that means something other than what we might be. Okay, good, all right. And her varied experiences. She was posted to 51 Air Control and Warning Operational Training Squadron in 2011, where she served as a weapons instructor. Promoted to captain in 2011, she conducted an operational deployment to Al Udeid, I probably butchered that, Air Force Base, Qatar, in 2012. She was then selected to move to 22 Wing Operations Support Squadron to lead the standards and evaluation section for all weapons positions at the Canadian Air Defense Sector. In 2014, she moved to Italy, where she served as an aircraft controller in the, this is straining me here, Poggio Renautico. Okay. Yeah, channeling my Italian ancestors there for a minute. And was awarded the Deployable Command and Control Center Officer of the Year in 2015, as well as the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe Allied Command Operations Military Member of the Year Award in 20. Good Lord above. Yes, where were we? Yes. Following promotion to major, she moved to her position as the first female operations officer at the Canadian Air Defense Sector. Good on ya. In 2021, she was moved to the Operational Support Squadron as the Deputy Commanding Officer, as well as taking on the role of Domestic Operations Officer for the wing. In 2022, she was posted to NORAD and NORTHCOM in Colorado Springs, Colorado, where she currently works as a staff officer in the J5 Plan, Strategy, and Policy Branch. In 2023, she was appointed to the Canadian Element at she was appointed the Canadian Element NORAD Gender Advisor and sent to Sweden for training at the Nordic Center for Gender and Military Operations. Good on ya. I know some of those folks, they're terrific. She works collaboratively in the NORAD and NORTHCOM environment in several different WPS and gender-based analysis plus efforts. In her 16-year military career, Major Leaton has been able to travel to multiple cities and countries and is still an avid travel enthusiast. Well, there's a story behind how you phrase that, isn't there? She still likes to travel despite everything she's been through. She also enjoys hiking, running, and participating with neighborhood sports teams. Happily married to Michael, proud mother of Alexander and Avery. Well, let's give a huge Texas welcome.
I have a slide deck. I'm sure you're all excited. Good day, and thank you so very much for the opportunity to speak to you today about the ally perspective, specifically that of Canada, and how we promote women, peace, and security, and the women, peace, and security agenda as part of our feminist foreign policy. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hudson, not only for your kind invitation to have me here, and for the wonderful lunch, and for reading my bio, which is, always embarrassing when you're stood there. But for your pioneering research, some of which is referenced in Government of Canada documents and previous national action plans. So number one, I wanted to display this beautiful photo, which was taken on Monday. This is a photo of me on Monday, the 11th of November, 2024, which for us Canadians is not Veterans Day, it's Remembrance Day. So it's a little more aligned with your Memorial Day. It's a day for us of ceremonies at war memorials where we remember our fallen. You can see me hugging my youngest child, that's Avery. And I am, as Dr. Hudson indicated, the proud mother of 2 little boys. And more than anything, I want them to grow up in a world where they're aware of the privilege they hold and where they can continue the important work of ensuring people in all our wonderful elements of diversity are treated with respect and kindness. So, this is Canada. You may have seen us before on a map. Today, I'm going to talk about a few things. In our time together, we'll discuss Canada and NORAD, Canada's approach to WPS, our latest national action plan, Foundations for Peace, which was just released earlier this year, GBA Plus, which you may or may not have heard of before. It's our gender-based analysis plus tool, as well as an exciting new initiative also established this year, the North American Defense Framework for WPS. Canada. We're a bit of a paradoxical country because we're a really big place. We're the second largest geographical country in the world, but we're quite small in population. We only have about the same amount of people as you have in California, right? So one state spread over the second largest geography in the world. And we are generally pretty well respected around the world. We have important foreign defense connections as part of NORAD, of course, part of the Five Eyes network, part of NATO, and strong connections to Great Britain as part of the Commonwealth. We have more coastline than any other country in the world, and a military that is roughly 2% of the size of the American military. Yeah, so our national animal is the beaver, which stands for perseverance, hard work. We have 2 national sports, one for winter, which lasts 6 months of the year, that's hockey, and one for summer, which is lacrosse, which is a nod to our Indigenous communities. We are an educated population with one of the highest rates of adults with tertiary education in the world, as well as being a language education leader, which makes sense as we have 2 official languages, both English and French. And ma présentation est en anglais, mais si vous le souhaitez, je peux vous fournir la présentation en français plus tard. Only Guillaume would have understood that, perhaps, but maybe, you're a French speaker as well, okay. Happy to provide it for you en français. We strive to be good neighbors to you, our friends and allies to the south, and one of the most important ways we do this is through the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. NORAD ensures the safety of the North American skies and careful monitoring of our water approaches. It's a collective defense strategy that has served both countries well over the last 66 years and counting. We also track Santa, as mentioned, whose address you will find is in Canada. So how does Canada tackle this? Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the WPS Network Canada for the beautiful logo displayed there. Our initial action plan on women, peace, and security was developed in 2010 and it was published in 2011 for the years from 10 to 16. Our second plan, published in 2017, was from 17 to 23, and then our current plan, Foundations for Peace, was published in March of this year and should take Canada through to 2029. In all of our national action plans, there are themes of inclusion, analysis, and respect. The current iteration really builds on a term called intersectionality, which we're going to further explore in a minute, and gender-based analysis plus. Our host, Dr. Hudson, as I mentioned, has been referenced in Canadian national action plans in the past, and specifically in her book, Sex and World Peace. Last week, I had the great good fortune of being in Mexico City for a Women, Peace, and Security Symposium of Western Hemisphere countries. And one of our colleagues there from Colombia said something that I found really profound. She said, "Inclusion is a decision." And I am proud to say that I think Canada is making that decision every day and respecting human dignity as a value aspect of an inclusive culture. Culture is visible through our everyday behaviors, words, actions, interactions, and our rituals. It's largely unconscious, right? This is not the first or the last time that I'm going to reference an iceberg for you because as a Canadian, I love ice, right? 90% of what we consider cultural behavior is stuff that's below the surface. We don't even notice it, right? Western cultures, you'll find it very common to look people in the eye when you're talking to them, but that is not the same across the board. You'll find many indigenous cultures, cultures elsewhere in the world where that is not the approach they take. But what defines an inclusive culture? Well, for us, an inclusive culture is one in which people personally feel encouraged to bring their full, authentic selves to work and are empowered to make meaningful contributions. You may notice some of that language very familiar. People see a strong level of connection, acceptance, and fairness across all groups at the organization, and the organization supports the foundation of strong bonds and enables people to make meaningful contributions. So why does inclusiveness matter? Well, we know that an inclusive culture helps drive operational performance. It gives an edge in attracting talent. It improves our decision-making, and it drives innovation and insight, as well as motivating us to help retain that top talent. This is important because it's at the core of our efforts in making the Canadian Armed Forces a place where people want to come to work. We have not always been good at doing this, right? And I'm not saying that we've got it perfect, but after a lot of introspection and self-reflection, in 2021, we stood up the Chief of Professional Conduct and Culture, which is an organization within the Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defense to ensure that we are living what we preach. We are creating inclusive cultures where people want to belong and where they feel safe and respected at work. In March of this year, we released our third national action plan, Foundations for Peace. The Women, Peace, and Security agenda was born from the advocacy of a global movement that recognized a troubling paradox. Despite often bearing the devastating consequences of violent conflict and playing multiple roles in peace and security, women are rarely seen as solution bearers, knowledge holders, or essential partners for peace. Yet when women's inclusion is prioritized, enduring peace is more likely. That's directly from our introduction in our National Action Plan. And you can see we have 6 focus areas building and sustaining peace, because peace is really good for Canada. We're a big country and probably not enough people to defend it if someone tried to attack us. We are concerned about security, justice, and accountability, right? So we're very aware of transparency and how that impacts a population and the benefit that it can have for your population in ensuring that you're considered to be conducting fair action. Crisis response, sexual and gender-based violence, leadership and capabilities, and this is one where, in particular, the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces lean in hard, because if your leadership is espousing the values of your organization, then the rest generally fall in line. And inclusion, which I will discuss a little bit further. Now, the National Action Plan in Canada is put together and is the primary responsibility of Global Affairs Canada, which is a little bit like the State Department in your government, but it also has a few other of your government departments' responsibilities. Just structurally, we're a little bit different. But the Canadian Armed Forces and the Department of National Defence are federal partners in this, along with 10 other federal institutions, like Indigenous Affairs, there's a number of them, public safety, who are all committed to advancing the WPS agenda, and all of the ministers signed off. It also aligns with our defense policies, like the one released in 2017, Strong, Secure, and Engaged, as well as Our North, Strong and Free, which was released in April of this year, so just after the National Action Plan dropped. As gender equality does not exist anywhere, the WPS agenda is relevant everywhere, including in Canada. I think if you polled the average Canadian, they might be surprised by that statement. They might think, well, we're pretty good in Canada. I mean, if you work in the federal workforce, I know that you're being paid the same whether you're a man or a woman. And that's true. But the barriers of our organization still exist for women, just as they do for other minority populations. Given the growing threats worldwide toward women, especially those who are racialized, have a precarious migrant status, and are part of queer communities, Canada must continue being a leader worldwide in promoting women's human rights. Investments, political strategies, speaking out, energy, and policy coherence are all required, including in multilateral fora where anti-feminist setbacks are all too common. However, these efforts by the Canadian government must be made in concert with domestic actions. Canada's third National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security provides an excellent opportunity to articulate and resource a coherent approach. And that is a subset of the National Action Plan that's from the Women, Peace and Security Network of Canada. So essentially, we know women, peace, and security is important. We know it's important abroad, but it's also very important in our own domestic context, right? We need to fix our house before we go fixing other people's houses. How we get after this is a lot of self-reflection, right? A term we commonly use is intersectionality, and then we also look at unconscious bias. You see that iceberg? You know I like ice. I'm gonna show you this waterline of visibility. So when you look at me, you'll see a middle-aged woman. I'm white. You can see the Canadian flag on my uniform, so you can sort of see my nationality a little bit. I'm walking around, so you may make assumptions about my physical ability. You can tell certain things about me, and in your head, you are probably unconsciously just making a list of how you think I'm going to behave, what sort of words are going to come out of my mouth, what kind of a threat I am to you personally if I pose any threat to your physical security. But what you don't see is the rest of the iceberg. You can't tell how educated I am until I start you You probably don't know my work style, how much I procrastinate on turning in papers. Sorry to our professors in the room. You can't tell those things, right? So how do you know how much power I have? Well, your immediate judgment is going to be that top bit of the iceberg. And if an organization only looks at the top bit of the iceberg when it's creating paths, it's probably not going to account for the remainder of the iceberg, and the ship might be on its way to sinking, right? The issue with some of this is that democracy, which is inherently not a bad concept, is a majority rules mindset. So it seems very fair, right? Everyone gets a vote. But when your organization is 80% one type of person, it completely discounts the unique thoughts and effects on minority populations. So that's where this wheel of power comes in. Because in Canada, at least, if you're near the center of this wheel, if you're married, you're bilingual, you're a citizen, you are probably of European descent, you have post-secondary education, you're middle-aged, and you're male, you are likely in a better position of power than those who are on the outside of the wheel. Intersectional identity is how we define diversity, right? It's all the unique characteristics that make us up as a human being. Diversity is defined as differences based on identity factors such as, but not limited to, age, culture, disability, education, ethnicity, gender expression and gender identity, immigration and newcomer status, indigenous identity, language, neurodiversity, parental status and responsibility, place of origin, religion, race, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic status. It took me a long time to read that list. Now imagine when you're making a plan trying to consider all of those factors, right? That's why it's important to do it early on so that your plans incorporate a more holistic approach so that when you come to the execution phase of a mission, you're already set up for success. The military has its own set of subcultures and intersectionality. I am wearing a blue t-shirt and have blue on my rank badge and name tag, which indicates I'm Air Force. But you may see a Canadian at a glance in the same uniform who's wearing green, who is clearly from an Army background. Even in the Air Force, I'm an aerospace controller. I'm not a pilot. I'm not a navigator. Those are the three main operational trades, but we have other trades in the Air Force. We have logistics officers, aerospace engineers, other subcultures that develop within units, based on your years of service, based on your rank. All of these things are a consideration for military people who look at each other at a glance. So this is not exclusive to any one population, and I'm sure you could come up with a wheel of intersectionality in the academic community, in your own social organizations. The bottom line is, it's important to keep in mind that people are not one-dimensional beings. The reality is closer to the concept of intersectionality that conceptualizes the marginalization and discrimination of a person or group as a result of multiple identity factors that overlap, combine, and interact with varying social structures and ideologies, which then shape people's unique lived experiences and life outcomes, determining the allocation of power and privilege of our experiences of advantages and disadvantages, and similarly, the creation or maintenance of inequalities and inequities. That is a quote from a paper written in 1993. So this is not like new and radical information. This is information that has existed for many decades. So Canada, in the mid-90s, 1995 to be specific, developed a plan on how we're going to get after intersectionality, and we called it Gender-Based Analysis Plus. It's the realization that everybody experiences things a little bit differently. It's analyzing how people are impacted by the decisions that are made, that we make in an organization, and that commonly understood language or lexicon is essential because it assists us in framing the issues, right? And at the core of all of this, you can see the graphic there where you identify an issue, you strategize, you solve it, and then you sort of go back and reflect and was this helpful? Did this get after the problem or not? At the core of that bottom line is data, right? That's where Texas A&M and the Women's Stats Project help us identify how and whether we're being successful is by that regeneration of data. I'm going to share a brief example with you that Guillaume shared with me. It's one of our wonderful gender focal points from the Western Air Defense sector, part of the NORAD structure. And that's the purchasing of chairs. Sounds simple, right? We've got 5 chairs to choose from. Everybody vote. What chair do you want? Great. 80% of people want chair B, so that's what we're going to go with. But as I said, our system is designed where the majority of people are one type of people, right? They're men primarily. So Guillaume and his organization said, well, can I see the data and the survey results and how that was broken down in terms of like, did women favor the same chair? Because if they didn't, if they preferred chair A, then a better solution is to purchase chair A and chair B, not just chair B, right? This is a simple example of how we can use a gender-based analysis plus to reflect on whether what we're doing as an organization is going to be successful. It's the Government of Canada's analytical tool. So we use it not just in the Department of National Defence and the Canadian Armed Forces, but throughout the government to assess how diverse groups of people experience policies, programs, and initiatives differently. It informs decision-making by accounting for that diverse lived experiences of people and communities impacted by any initiative. So that's the tool we use. Early this year, I was lucky enough to be in the first picture there at the top, which is a group of us at the Inter-American Defense College in Washington, D.C. And we stood up a program called the North American Defense Framework for Women, Peace, and Security between Mexico, the Bahamas, Canada, and the USA, where we engaged together in partnership on various WPS initiatives with 3 specific lines of effort regarding gender perspectives in military operations, reduction of gender-based violence, and WPS in professional military education. Last week, we were in Mexico. I missed a big snowstorm in Colorado, so thanks. And you can see we further developed a 5-year strategy and have future planned some efforts into 2030, which we hope will not only improve the state of WPS in all 4 countries, but will allocate resourcing to this important program, to this important initiative, and there will be tie-ins to various organizations, perhaps Texas A&M, maybe the Irregular Warfare Center. We're striving to be a more collaborative environment where we can all succeed in this project together. I know I'm a little bit delayed here, but I'm happy to take any quick questions. Yes, of course.
And would anyone like to ask one question? It's about all of that. Well, I'll ask a question. Are there different flavors of WPS in Canada as versus the United States?
I would say we go beyond examination of just gender into that intersectionality space, right? Because we're trying to consider people as a whole. We know women are not all the same. The example that we had in the discussion panel of the women from Darfur is a great example, right? Like women, and again, this is where you have to examine your own internal biases. Women can just as easily be combatants as they can be victims, right? So if an organization only thinks of a person as one thing, they're probably more likely to fail in their mission. So I wouldn't say we're necessarily that different in our approach. We're still, a Western country, obviously very strong relationship with the United States, and we rely on each other for support in this arena. But I think we are trying in some ways with NATO especially to kind of move beyond just traditional gendered roles.